want to dive into this even further with legal analyst and friend of the program, Nicole DeBoard, who's joining us here. Nicole, you also watched and heard of what happened today in court at Kohberger's arraignment. What are your initial thoughts on today's court appearance?
I think it was expected that he would enter what's called a silent plea, essentially affirming that he is not going to be entering a plea of guilty and just eliminating his trial from date from happening. So that's a pretty natural step in the process. And now what will happen is that the lawyers on both sides will get geared up for that October trial date. And we will hear more about motions, I suspect, in between now and then.
So we didn't hear from Kohberger today, but we did get a chance to kind of look at his demeanor. We talked about this before. I think most recently was when that body camera footage came out from Washington State Police. Nicole, what did you think of Kohberger's demeanor from what you saw?
From the very brief encounter that I saw with the police back on that video, it seems that he's probably going to have a difficult time testifying in front of a jury. That said, you can't tell much from just his demeanor in court right now. His lawyer is essentially doing all the talking for him, which is to be expected. And the natural progression is for the court to proceed, assuming that there will not be a guilty plea, and have the case ready for trial in October.
So I do want to go back to what we were talking about right at the beginning there. After Kohberger's attorney said that they would be standing silent, the judge entered the not guilty pleas then on Kohberger's behalf. Can you explain from a legal perspective why they decided to stand silent, why the judge was the one who had to say that, and is that common in a case of this magnitude?
It is common, and by standing silent, you are telling the court essentially that, look, we're not entering any kind of plea. We are not accepting responsibility for the charges, and therefore the only option the court has in that circumstance is to enter what's called really a not guilty plea on the person's behalf, and that allows the case to proceed. It doesn't require any action on the part of the accused.
Another thing that came up today as well was knowing that officially the prosecutor's office has 60 days to notify the defense and the court if they are going to seek the death penalty in this case. I think a question that many people would have is, isn't that expected that the prosecutor's office would seek that, especially with a case as heinous as this one?
No doubt these charges are really as just awful and heinous as they come. And I think that it is something that is potentially likely. Now, that said, any county that is dealing with a case of this magnitude already has a giant tab that they're going to be dealing with in terms of the prosecution of the case. And then turning it into a death penalty case turns this into a millions and millions of dollar expense for the county. So it depends really on whether or not they find a verdict, which would very well keep him in custody for the rest of his life if they get that verdict, versus moving forward with a death penalty trial, which would require ongoing appeals for many, 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 many years.
So looking ahead to October 2nd, his now set trial date, is it likely that that could be delayed then, depending on what the prosecutor's office decides, or what do you think we can expect between now and October 2nd?
That's a great question. And if the prosecutors do decide that they would like to pursue the death penalty, I think that we can expect a delay, because there are quite a lot of additional things that likely will need to happen before a defense team could be ready to defend a death penalty case. And even if the trial date were to remain on the fall horizon, which if there's a death penalty sought, I can't imagine that will be the case. Once you get into the jury selection process, the case already becomes much more time consuming than a case that is not a death penalty case.
And we also heard in that report from Matt Finn, he spoke with someone else was on Fox talking about this case, just speaking about, the longer that this goes on, the longer that we're waiting for the trial to get started, the more that it becomes a concern that people might not remember some of those details. What are your thoughts on, if the trial gets delayed and that being a concern of folks, of witnesses, or of people who could potentially testify in this?
I think it's always a concern. I mean, the longer the prosecution takes, the harder it can be sometimes to develop certain evidence. Now, that said, this case, despite the fact that it must feel just awfully slow to the family members of the victims in this case. It has moved really rocket fast for cases that are this serious, especially with this many victims. So I do think that, it is painful. It has got to feel slow. But as far as court systems go, charges like these generally take some time to work their way through the system.
Yeah, Nicole, one last question, too. I know because it's still quite some times away, it's hard to even really think that far ahead. But the chances of Kohberger testifying in this trial, how high or how likely do you think that is?
Gosh, that is a hard guess. I mean, as we know, that is a decision that is entirely up to Kohberger. So he could decide to do it even if his lawyers advise him not to do it. And just from that video we have of his traffic stop that we've seen played on the show, it seems to me that he thinks he has a lot more control over circumstances than he may have. And this may mean that he's the kind of guy that wants to testify whether his attorneys want him to or not. And then if he does, he'll testify.
Yeah, there's a lot that is going to happen over here in the next few months, especially looking ahead to October 2nd. Nicole, any final thoughts here, anything that we may have missed you'd like to point out regarding this upcoming trial?
I'll be watching with you to see what the DA's office decides in terms of seeking the death penalty, and I'm eagerly awaiting the various motions that we can expect, I think, both sides to be filing.
Yeah, absolutely. So many people have their eyes on this case. Nicole DeBoard, as always, thank you so much for coming on and breaking this all down for us. I really appreciate all of your insight, as always.
Thanks for having me.